Hello, welcome to today's topic is take higher resolution. Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Tower Duo. So, I'm your host Andrew. I've been playing Pokemon for about 5 years. I'm currently working towards owning and beating all of the Pokemon games. And with me, as always, is co-host Connor.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Connor. Unlike Andrew, I've been playing Pokemon for about as long as I can remember. I used to collect the cards so much, watch a lot of the anime. I've been playing the games basically since Fire Red, and so I've had a lot of experience playing Pokemon games, and I gotta say, I know a lot about them too. And so basically, with that aside, we can kind of start talking about what's going to be changing from Season 2 to Season 3. So if you want, Andrew, you can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so we're cutting our episode time down from about an hour to about 30 minutes, and we're going to try and be more consistent with our episode lengths as well. So we also have a lot of changes in terms of how the episodes are made, and I think Connor had some information there.
Oh, yeah, of course. So as you probably saw, we changed the intro from the first season to the second. And also the overlay that you're looking at that's all around us is going to look different too. So I hope that you like how those look. And if you have any feedback for us, totally just let us know.
Yeah, and of course, the overlay that's here right now isn't always going to be here. So we actually have a lot of things planned where we're going to need to show some things that aren't our faces over the course of these episodes during the season. So look forward to that. And that just about sums up the changes from season 2. So with that out of the way, we can move on to the content of this episode proper. So today we're really going to be focusing on the pre-release seasons from every region. So we're going to be grouping them together by region. So everything from Hoenn is going to be together. Everything from Sinnoh, including the Legends Arceus season and stuff, it's going to be together with the old Sinnoh stuff.
Yep, and basically the reason that we're doing this is we just kind of want to compare a lot of the pre-seasons for Pokemon games, like their pre-season reception compared to the reception after the games came out.
Yeah, so kicking off our season theme of Around the Pokemon World, we're going to be talking about every region in this episode, but after that, we will just be talking about one region per episode. So, with all that said, we'll be starting, of course, in Kento with the very first Pokemon games. So, when Pokemon was first being developed and all of that, there wasn't really a lot of hype because people didn't really know what it was yet. So I wasn't actually able to find the original announce date or any of the information regarding the games. There was just one poster that I was able to find, and that is on screen now. So that's what that poster looked like. And I know there were a couple of different things in Japanese magazines, but my Japanese is not good enough to read them, so that is pretty much what happened in Generation 1. So now on to Fire Red and Leaf Green. So in the almost 10 years, well, okay, kind of like 8 years, between the original Kanto games and the Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes, there was a substantial amount of increase in the number of internet users, in the number of websites, and what this allowed is that there are actually still some websites from back then that are talking about these games. And one which I found is really interesting because it was about the announcement, which was on September 15th, 2003. And there was an article posted on that day, and the comments seemed to focus on questioning why there were remakes being made, because this was a new thing, of course. And one person said, and this is actually the top comment, and I don't know how the comments are sorted on this website or if the sorting has changed over time, but the top comment says this is the definition of a ripoff because they said that if Nintendo wanted to remake Kento, they should have just done it once. But since they've already done a Kento remake, that being Yellow, um, that they shouldn't do another one. So the group now known as Gen Oneers was, of course, not really called that at the time because they were just sort of coming out of the second generation, which is really tied into the first generation, and that was the original wave of Pokemon hype in general. You know, that they called it Pokemon Mania for a reason. And what's interesting is that was actually the group of people who were excited about the new Fire Red and Leaf Green games because they were going back to Kanto again. So with that out of the way, we're going to be moving on to Johto, one of the most interesting pre-release seasons that Pokemon has had,
Oh
especially
yeah,
out of the earlier generations.
yeah, you are definitely very right about that. So, obviously, Johto was coming in hot on the heels of Kanto in Generation One, and so kind of in the release cycle of Johto, there was a lot of hype behind the game. Like, there were a ton of people who were very excited. Like, Pokemon was very mainstream at the time. Like, the anime had started up in 1997, and the game got released in 1999. So there was a whole 2 years where the anime was, basically going on full steam and everything. And so basically, there was a lot of support behind it. And while we couldn't really find much on the internet, there was obviously one huge event that happened that a lot of people were able to attend, and it was called Spaceland. And in this event, there was a demo of the Pokemon, the next generation of Pokemon. And the game that was actually showed off in the Spaceland event, well, there were a lot of changes in it compared to the final product. And one of those changes was that a lot of the Pokemon were incredibly different than what they turned out to be.
Like three of the starter Pokemon were. So obviously you can kind of tell that the grass one is similar to something that you've seen before. Obviously that looks a lot like Chikorita, but the other two are very different. So the grass one was known as Happa, the fire one was known as Honoguma, and the water one was known as Karusu. And the starters weren't the only Pokemon that their designs changed a lot from what they turned out to be. Okay, and so with the original Gold and Silver out of the way, it's about time to cover the remakes, which were Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So when the Heart Gold and Soul Silver was announced, there wasn't too much hype behind it, since a lot of people, like you said before, at that time were pretty invested in Gen 1 and only Gen 1. And actually, when Gold and Silver came out, there wasn't nearly as much positive reception as the original games, because a lot of people just really like Generation 1 for one reason or another. So there wasn't very much outcry, like I said before, about these games. There was a whole series that took place in Johto in the anime. But other than that, and apart from a couple ads that were on YouTube, there wasn't very much advertisement for them. So yeah, that's just about everything that I had to say about Johto. So if you want, Andrew, you can go ahead and get started on Hoenn.
So now moving on to Ruby and Sapphire. These are the first games on the Game Boy Advance, which means that they're incompatible with the original games. And this is still a pattern that has held up where all of the games since then have been compatible with the Ruby and Sapphire games. So the original announcement was on the 7th of March, 2001, so way before the games came out. And it was just called Pokemon Advance at that time. And for a while, that's all the information that there was. And then in July of 2002, the games finally got their names released. There was like another huge dump of information at that time. What's interesting is by this point, they had really figured out the suspenseful game release cycle where they give you a little bit of information and it's just enough for you to want more. So they would release like 4 Pokemon, and like that's what you can see for today. And then finally, on the 21st of November 2002, the games came out in Japan. It would be until 2003 before the games came out in the rest of the world. So now moving on to the remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So by this point in time, what's really started to happen is the modern media state of Pokemon has started to emerge. So they have a YouTube channel, and there are Pokemon Directs that are separate from Nintendo Directs by this point. And that's really interesting because people are able to react to the videos almost immediately and talk about them almost immediately. So there were a couple of different trailers, and people were very highly anticipating these games. So there was a meme for a long time of Hone Confirmed, where people tried to prove that these games were going to come out. And it was just sort of conjecture. That is sort of what people were anticipating. So when the games were officially announced, people were really excited because all of their work paid off.
Yeah, so moving right along, we can kind of start to talk about Sinnoh and the Diamond and Pearl games. And so Diamond and Pearl, unlike the Ruby and Sapphire games, were announced with their names in 2004. In their promotional materials, Diamond and Pearl was actually described by Masuda himself to be the ultimate version of Pokemon. But basically, the gist of the advertisements is that they were boasting first off the bottom screen support because this was the first DS Pokemon game. Second off, the Wi-Fi compatibility. So while they didn't really go into the GTS or anything like that, there were a lot of commercials that boasted being able to trade Pokemon from around the world. And the final thing that they really showed off a lot was PAL Park and being able to transfer Pokemon from earlier games to that one. Yeah, so after Diamond and Pearl were released, we didn't really get to see Sinnoh for a long while until 2021 on May 26th when Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were announced. And this announcement was followed by absolutely nothing until August of that year. And basically all that was really given about the game were a couple YouTube videos explaining details. And there was very little information that was given out about the games to people who weren't actively looking for it on, the Pokemon YouTube channel or other such sources. And so the advertisement wasn't really given out to people who weren't interested in the games. And finally, the game was dropped in, I believe, November of that year. And it came out to mixed reception, as you've probably heard of. So yeah, that's just about everything I had to say about Sinnoh. We can probably move on to Unova now.
So by the time Black and White were announced, a lot of things had changed in the Pokemon franchise. First of all, in that gap of time, from 2006 to 2010, what had really changed is that people were moving from forums to YouTube in terms of where Pokemon hype was being discussed and where things were being anticipated. And we see this sort of more gradually from Pokemon themselves. They're starting to transition towards their YouTube channel instead of press releases. So that's a transition that's going on at this time. We don't have a lot of reaction videos, so it's not such a big deal that people are competing to make their videos as quickly as possible or anything like that. But people are definitely excited about the games. There's a lot of comments on the older videos, a lot of which are newer, so people have definitely been going back to these videos to watch the old announcements for a while. And it's interesting because this was a transition period, like I talked about, and that means that people are still turning to like Koro Koro magazine, and trying to get information for that. Also, getting information from Cerebi, which is a 10-year-old website by this point in time, and like people are coming through the details, looking like when the first picture of Zoroark came, people really were interested in finding out more information. And it's this sort of thing that starts to end around this time, just because it's turned into a much more multimedia franchise, and Koro Koro isn't really the be-all and end-all authority on like Pokemon leaks and rumors anymore. And then of course there was Black and White 2. And what was interesting about this generation was that it was the first time when there wasn't a singular third higher edition. So people were confused as to why there wasn't a Pokemon Gray, because they speculated about Pokemon Gray for a long time, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But there was one commenter who was smart enough to point out that making a Pokemon Gray would contradict the idea of what Pokemon is trying to tell as a story in this generation. That's what's going on. There's also a lot of newer comments from people saying that it's their favorite Pokemon game, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There was...
Pretty solid.
Yeah, so the announcement, they've started... It's become more standardized at this point. They've started to have a regular schedule where they will announce games in February towards the end of the month around Pokemon Day, and then release them later in the year.
Yep.
And that sort of started around this time. There were several video trailers, so we're past the point where there's just like the one announcement, and they're starting to realize, like Pokemon is starting to realize, that people really care about what's in the first trailer, so they're not putting that much. They're just basically announcing that the games exist, and then they're gradually revealing more information because they're catching on to the hype cycle. And then so there was like a September 2012 trailer, and people were really excited about that. There were a couple of reaction videos, but that wasn't really a thing yet. So mostly it was just content coming after. This is also sort of when a lot of the now really big Pokemon YouTubers were getting their start or would start soon. So there's a lot more theories in more recent games, and at this point it was more of just the facts and just being excited.
Yep. So X and Y was announced in January of 2018. So like you were saying, like towards the beginning of the year. And also, like you were saying, there really wasn't very much announced in the initial trailer. It was just there was just a big announcement where they showed off starter Pokemon and they showed off protagonists, and that's about all that they really did. And then in the time following that teaser trailer, there were a couple videos on the YouTube channel for Pokemon. So they revealed Pokemon like Go-Goat and Sylveon, and then they did something really interesting. What that was is they revealed Mega Mewtwo Y before they revealed Mega Evolutions. So nobody had any idea what was happening, and there was a ton of speculation. Like they just announced it. They just in the video, they were like, "Man, a Mewtwo-like Pokemon has appeared." And so there were a lot of reactions to this. There were a lot of theories about what this Mewtwo was. There was definitely the theory, oh man, this has gotta be Mew 3. It's finally happening. and there were other people saying like, no, this is just a female version of Mewtwo, and it's just going to be two different gender differences. But anyway, after a while of this speculation, they finally did a Mega Evolution reveal where they showed that Mega Evolution was the reason that Mewtwo looked that way, and they also revealed, Mega Evolution forms for a couple of the other Pokemon. And then just the rest of the hype cycle was pretty much revealing more Mega Evolutions, more Pokemon forms. It was pretty standard after that. I just thought it was hilarious how they created a bunch of speculation by doing that.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is how they've sort of gone from like really obvious reveals to more subtle reveals, where it's like what it used to be is like, oh, look at this, I have this low resolution picture from some sort of Japanese magazine, and it's like, but I can clearly see what it is, even if it's out of focus, or
Yeah.
even if the resolution is kind of low. Whereas now it's sort of gotten to the point where it's like, well, if you pause at this specific moment, you can see this thing, and that wasn't a thing in Generation 5. So we'll speculate on that and make a video about it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, that has been happening a lot. And that honestly kind of started with X and Y. I saw a couple videos like pointing out specific parts of trailers and things. But yeah, in terms of like reception, Megas did not have very good reception when they were first announced. There were a lot of people who were strongly opposed to them. They were like, "No, Charizard is the final evolution. There is no other Charizard, and I will not be told differently."
So we really see the emergence of the, let's say, conservative and liberal factions within Pokemon. Like traditionalist people that want the existing paradigm to stay the same, and
Mhm.
people that embrace the changes that Pokemon is making. And this, of course, continued to be polarized.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's crazy. It is crazy just how much has changed since then. Like now, there is hardly anyone who is against Mega Evolutions now, and everyone wants them to be back. But back then, it was super controversial just because people didn't want things to be changed, I guess.
Yeah, so would you say that Generation 6 is the first time when we really see that sort of setup where people are thinking in polarized ways about Pokemon games? Whereas in the past, like, they had just sort of been really excited about whatever it was. So on the 20th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise, Sun and Moon were announced. And what had changed by this time from X and Y is really the live stream, the rise of live streams. And so what people are now doing is not just making, reactions after the fact, but live reactions. And a lot of people are watching them, and they're getting the information as soon as it's being revealed. And this really changes the way that Pokemon announcements are perceived, because now everything that Pokemon does is being criticized instantly on the spot. And so they really have to make sure that their reveals are perfect. And so, in order to make sure that that's a reality, they need to put a lot more time and effort into their reveals. So, Generation 5 reveals were sort of basic. Generation 6 reveals were a little bit more detailed. And then these Generation 7 reveals, they're just putting everything into it. Of course, it was a meme for a while, the Generation 7 reveal font, with the sun and moon background, because they used it over and over. And people are really tearing apart these trailers. People are trying to leak the games beforehand. And it's sort of become like a quote-unquote big business of trying to figure out every little piece of the puzzle beforehand. And that's really when this starts to happen. And so we get like all the data mining. This is also like around the time when the older stuff, so like the Space World demo, they're working on that at this time. When was that leaked?
I don't think I found a date on that, but I can look it up.
I believe that it was like somewhere within like 4 to 6 years ago, which was around when Generation 7 was being announced and such. And
Yeah.
this, of course, really cements the schedule. They're very strict with it. It's always like a middle of November release and a late February announcement, and that's what it's been generally since then. Although Legends Arceus has sort of messed things up a little bit. We'll see if they announce something on Pokemon Day this year, which we're only a couple of weeks away from. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about Pokemon Day actually.
Yeah. Okay. So Pokemon Day is a thing, Connor.
Yeah. Yep.
But regardless of what they end up doing this year, there is still another pair of games, that of course being Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The big thing with Ultra Sun and Moon was, of course, the Ultra Wormholes and the Team Rainbow Rocket editions. And that's what people were talking about. So there wasn't really a lot to reveal for these games because they were so similar, but people were still very excited, analyzing, speculating, and this is when the Pokemon community generally came to accept that everything will be leaked at some point before the game actually comes out, but the guessing game comes down to we don't know which leak is the true one and which leaks are fake. So let's now turn our attention to the most recent game to have a new region, and that would be Sword and Shield.
Yep. All right, so Sword and Shield was announced on February 27th of 2019, and in the trailer, you probably remember it pretty vividly. They showed off pretty much only starters in a couple of the locations, as well as protagonists and stuff. There was no mention of Dynamax or anything. They didn't really they kind of followed an XY step, whereas they didn't want to show off the brand new gimmick of the game. And so they didn't reveal Dynamax until June 5th. And, before then they were sporadically revealing different Pokemon. But yeah, so they went from February until June without revealing Dynamax. And then they kind of just showed off Dynamax in June. And then they showed off Gigantamax in the next month in July. And so kind of the response to Dynamax, it wasn't, I wouldn't really say it was similar to what the response was to Mega Evolution, because Mega Evolution was like, oh no, new stuff, this is so bad. But Dynamax is more like, people thought it wasn't the best idea because it was just Pokemon but bigger, but sometimes they look different. And so the fan response on Dynamax wasn't the greatest, and I feel like it kind of continues to not be the greatest to this day. But yeah, after the Gigantamax reveal, they just continually showed off new Gigantamax forms as well as new Galar Pokemon until the game's released, which was in November of that year.
Yeah, it's been very fan-driven. I think, now that the Pokemon community is established and mature, and there are a lot of members of the Pokemon community like us that are adults, it's very much driven by that. And so the advertising is more geared towards getting new people in, because they all know that the reliable consumers, us included, are going to just buy every game no matter what, in order to, even if we just buy it and review it negatively, we still bought it.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
And
a lot of money off that fact.
And they know that's going to happen for a very long time. So those are our thoughts on the evolution of Pokemon marketing and the preseason hype. And next week we're going to be taking a look at why the police doesn't do anything about Team Rocket, and by extension all of the other evil teams across the region. So we'll be starting our Pokemon Around the World where Pokemon started in Kento. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one with Connor. Goodbye.